Well, as the world continues to turn in Washington there, let's bring it a little closer to home to Michigan, where there's already been a lot of action in Lansing and a lot of items, I think, on the to-do agenda for Governor Whitmer, Nolan.
Well, there are. She's been issuing a lot of directives right off the bat. You know, at some point she's going to have to work with the legislature. You can't govern by directives. I think she's made a couple of questionable moves with those. I think this challenge to Line 5, that was a problem that was solved, and probably solved in the best way possible. You got Enbridge building a tunnel under the lake, a safe tunnel, to put this pipeline into and other utility lines into, and they're paying for it. So this was a problem that should have been off the plate. She's going to make it a problem again, because it's at some point we got to figure out, if we're not going to use Line 5, how we're going to get 540,000 barrels of petroleum products from Canada and the Upper Peninsula down here to southern Michigan every day.
Right, but she campaigned extensively that she wanted to see something differently done with Line 5, and she's taking a second. She's taking a second look at that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what has been developing so far out of Lansing, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. New Year's Day 2019, Lansing, the state capital.
As I think about the monumental task that lies ahead,
Governor Gretchen Whitmer's inaugural address called for fixing the roads and a collaborative spirit with the legislature. No mention of Line 5, but just a day later, she asked incoming Attorney General Dana Nessel to look into it. She wants legal opinions over a new tunnel planned under the Straits of Mackinac. Environmental groups like the National Wildlife Federation reacted positively.
Yes, I think it was a very strong indication that they are very serious about this issue when the first thing that they do on day one of their administration is push through this review.
Line 5, the pipeline moving oil and natural gas liquids under the Straits since the 1950s, owned by Canada-based Enbridge Incorporated, in recent years considered by some an environmental catastrophe waiting to happen. Nessel promised on the campaign trail and to us in an interview that she would fight to shut the line down.
We're very honestly looking at what could quite possibly turn out to be the biggest oil spill in American history. It can be easily prevented if only we act in time.
Can she just shut this thing down?
She could, yes. There are ongoing violations. In fact, those violations were noted in some of the backdoor agreements that were made between Enbridge and Snyder. And those violations could start a clock for the new governor to start a decommissioning process.
Outgoing Governor Rick Snyder worked with Enbridge on an agreement for the new tunnel with the pipeline. And Snyder created a commission to oversee the tunnel, a commission now under legal review with Whitmer and Nessel in charge. Enbridge issued a statement that the company looked forward to working with the new administration.
Now, the members of the legislature, the Republicans anyway, also took note of Governor Whitmer's statements in her inaugural address, where she said she wants to work collaboratively with the legislature.
I am so looking forward to working with you over the next weeks and months and years.
So they kind of turned that around and said that they're hoping that she'll work collaboratively with them on Line 5. So they sort of set the bar high and laid down the gauntlet a little bit there.
We owe it to the people we serve to cast partisanship aside.
Great Lakes Now's Gary Wilson said Whitmer will have to decide how much time and political capital she wants to spend on Line 5 with other big issues topping her list. The question in Lansing now, what other action might the administration take?
There is the possibility that the Attorney General or potentially even an environmental group could go to a court and ask a judge to issue an injunction against anything going forward on Line 5 until all the legal issues are solved. But lawyers tell me that judges are loath to issue injunctions unless there's a serious imminent threat coming from Line 5. Now, that could be debated, but it's unlikely that, as it stands right now, Line 5 poses an imminent threat to the point where a judge would issue an injunction. So that's sort of a Hail Mary pass.
Beth Wallace of the National Wildlife Federation questioned the Snyder Tunnel when it was first proposed. Now she's concerned how the legislation was recently rushed through.
They took 3 to 4 years looking at this issue and then decided in the last couple months of their administration to push through something that didn't have legal review, didn't have fiscal review, wasn't supported by the public, wasn't supported by many businesses in the region, by many lawmakers.
But the tunnel has labor support, meaning some traditional Democrats have joined that side of a fight expected to go on for a while.
The same lawyers tell me that there'll be litigation over Line 5, there'll be a winner and a loser. The other side, the losing side, will appeal. So we're going to be talking about Line 5 for some time to come in the future.
The contract states Enbridge must turn off the existing Line 5 by the end of year 2028. That's 10 years away. But there's an exception to that deadline, meaning it could keep running even longer if there are delays building the tunnel that's supposed to replace it. Enbridge spokesperson Ryan Duffy told Great Lakes Now's Gary Wilson that the tunnel agreement contains, quote, a number of required milestones and deadlines. Our goal to complete the entire project is 2024, end quote.
You know, I think something that we can all agree on, though, is that this maybe is not over, that there is going to be a long process to see what happens next here with Line 5.
Yeah, so, I mean, Governor Snyder, former Governor Snyder, thought he fixed this issue, but he fixed it in a way that a lot of environmentalists and advocates are not happy with. And the new governor has as much right as he did to figure out her own solution. She's doing it in a really methodical way. She's asked the Attorney General to reopen this and take a look and figure out what can be done. There's nothing wrong with that. And the solution that the governor came up with was one that still put the lakes at risk. And some people don't believe that we ought to be doing that.
I don't think it puts the lakes at risk. This tunnel's 100 feet below the bed. I know what will put the lakes at risk if we start putting those petroleum products on freighters and on tanker trucks and on rail lines where a spill is much more likely. This line hasn't spilled in its 60-year history.
But I think what people have concerns about is the safety checks that Enbridge has done or has not done and their history and what happened with the Kalamazoo River. It'll be interesting to see now how this all starts to play out. But again, happening in the first really week of her administration. Nolan, what else are you hearing in terms of agenda items now that the new legislature is coming in, where we're going to start to see some testing here?
Well, we haven't really seen her sit down with the legislature. She's tried to put an early stamp on government with these executive directives, executive orders, if you will. Again, as before we get too far into January, she's going to have to sit down with the legislative leaders and decide what are our priorities for this session. What are we going to try to work together on? She said roads. I think they want roads, and I think that's going to be the early focus. I hope it's the early focus.
And what do you think we'll see? What kind of form is that going to take?
You know, I don't know. I mean, there are a number of different proposals that have come from the Republican side that I think she's going to have to decide whether they can be part of a package to fix roads, but she's also going to need Republicans to be open to the idea of revenue, and that's the sticking point. That's been the sticking point for several years, new revenue to dump into the roads. I've said for a while that I think it's such a priority for her, and there's pressure from the public on Republicans to also help deliver. I think they get something done early this year that is more of a solution than we've seen before. I don't know if it's a complete solution, and hopefully that becomes the basis for a relationship between her and the legislature.
This is a terrific time to come up with that solution. With gas price under $2,
low, right.
You could
some kind of tax would be a lot more palatable than in the past.
We're at like 26, 27 cents a gallon on state taxes. Out in Washington State, 50 cents a gallon. Right. We are way low on that. And now is the time you could tag 20 cents on and people wouldn't notice.
Yeah, but are you seeing any kind of sense, though, from Republicans in the state of Michigan, where you've said this has been a sticking point before, that there is any kind of change when it comes to that thought?
I think asking them for a tax increase is going to be very hard. But I think
give them
it's
something.
the right thing to do. If you have to give them something. Now, I don't know what that something is. The governor tried to get a few cents on a garbage fee and couldn't get that. So I don't know if you're going to get a tax increase out of this legislature.
All right, so roads, anything else that I should be looking for now in the next couple of weeks?
Auto insurance, I've talked with both the incoming speaker as well as the House Minority Leader. They both mentioned auto insurance as still a priority for them in terms of taking another bite at that apple. They tried at the last minute in the lame duck session to revive that. There you still have the sticking point between you know, the amount of coverage that people get and the other considerations. Lots of people don't want to create a two-tiered system or revisit no fault. I'm not sure that you can come up with a solution at this point without going quite that far.
Yeah, that's a big issue to take a chunk out of this early on.
And you have Dan Gilbert in the mix saying if they don't fix it, he'll fund a ballot proposal.
Which we don't want.
I mean, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger on behalf of their constituents over these insurance rates. They're going to have to act. And, you know, this is where you got Democrats fighting Democrats, Republicans fighting Republicans. There's no clear political break here. You got to put together a coalition on